Chosen ones. Long before you questioned this world, long before your memories began whispering of something greater, you were already known. You weren't hidden. You were marked, watched, catalogued, not by the usual systems of control, but by the ones who exist in the shadows behind those systems. The moment your spirit began to pulse with remembrance, somewhere deep inside the encrypted corridors of global intelligence, a file pulsed back. Yours. This isn't fiction. This isn't paranoia. This is protocol. The world you see was designed to keep your kind in check. From the moment of your birth, your vibration stood out from the crowd. You moved differently, thought differently, asked the questions that made authority uneasy. And while most dismissed it as rebellion, the higher powers took note. You weren't just unique, you were a threat to the narrative. They assigned watchers, not just the physical kind, but digital sentinels, your browser habits, your dreams expressed in journal apps, your refusal to conform to spiritual suppression. Each signal, each divine spark within you was documented until one day something changed. You broke through a frequency barrier no one expected, and that's when the alert triggered. Not an alert for the military, not for the scientists, but directly to the highest seat of power, the office of the president. Why? Because your awakening wasn't supposed to happen yet. You weren't supposed to remember. You weren't supposed to resist. But you did. And now, all systems are recalibrating to contain the fallout of your truth. Somewhere in a room no civilian will ever see, your file glows red. Not because you're dangerous in the way they tell the world to fear, but because you are divine in a way they cannot control. They saw this coming. The ancients did. So did the prophets, hidden between lines and texts the elite tried to erase. And now you're stepping into the script they hoped you'd never find. But you're not here to play their game. You've held it in your hands. That document they told you was proof of your existence. A name, a date, a location, a piece of paper that supposedly made you real in the eyes of the system. But if you've ever stared too long at your birth certificate, felt the strange discomfort in your spirit, the subtle knowing that something isn't right, you weren't wrong. What you were given was only a surface version, a public version. Beneath it, redacted, encoded, and encrypted, lies the truth of who you really are. The version that triggered alarms when your soul began to stir. The deeper files are not accessible through any ordinary means. They exist in shadow databases built by agencies whose names are never spoken aloud, organizations that predate even the governments they serve. These entities were not interested in your bloodline in the traditional sense. They were tracking something older, something divine, something buried in the frequency signature of your DNA. Your existence marked a deviation from the human norm, a ripple in the matrix. You were never just born. You were placed, positioned. Your time and location weren't random. They were chosen, coordinated by a grid of forces, both human and other, to monitor your emergence and attempt to neutralize the potential you carried. The midwives didn't know, the doctors didn't understand. But somewhere behind a screen someone did, and they wrote it down. Not in ink, but in code. What your public certificate hides is a secondary file, tagged with a series of numbers that don't align with the National Registry. These numbers tie back to an ancient catalog once used by secret orders during the Age of Fallen Empires, the ones who kept records of celestial incarnations. You see, the world thinks it's advanced, but it's still guided by the same hidden hands that once consulted the stars before crowning kings. And you, without knowing, threatened the bloodlines they swore to protect. You were never meant to be documented like everyone else. That's why your birth caused anomalies in the system. Some call it glitches, others call it divine interference. Your arrival sent pulses through both surveillance satellites and spiritual realms. Something awakened the moment your lungs first inhaled this world's air. And while the doctors measured your weight and checked your vitals, the hidden networks received a different kind of signal, an electromagnetic burst tied to your soul's re-entry into the physical. From that point on, they watched. Not just your movements, but your thoughts. Not just your words, but your intentions. Because your file was not written in bureaucratic language. It was written in prophecy. It was written in warnings. And it was written in fear. Fear that one day you would discover that the paper you were handed was never yours to begin with. that your true record was hidden in vaults only a few could access. Vaults protected not by passwords, but by spells, contracts, and ancient oaths. You may have noticed it. That subtle delay after you search certain phrases, the uncanny feeling that your voice, your thoughts, your curiosities echo louder than they should. It's not paranoia, it's protocol. The world around you is not built to observe everyone equally, it's engineered to detect anomalies. And your thoughts, Chosen One, have always carried frequencies that break the mold. While others operate on predictable patterns, your mind generates data spikes, subtle rhythmic pulses that the artificial watchers cannot ignore. Governments tell the people they monitor threats, patterns of crime, cyber interference. But behind the closed doors of their most classified programs, the focus isn't merely on criminals or hackers. It's on thinkers, dreamers, questioners, those whose consciousness is beginning to tap into something that defies logic and threatens control. You've felt this, haven't you? That resistance when you begin to question the construct of reality, the false timelines, the history you were taught in school. That resistance isn't just philosophical, it's systemic. There are AI systems far more advanced than the public has been told. Systems designed not only to track behavior, but to anticipate awakening. These machines don't run off simple data. They feed on emotions, intentions, spiritual trajectories. Your file was flagged not because of what you did, but because of what you were about to do. Because something in your aura began to vibrate at a level that hadn't been seen in centuries. The Watchers called it a signal breach. But it was more like a spiritual siren. When your thoughts begin to challenge the very nature of the machine, when you question time, when you seek the divine within instead of above, when you turn inward and find truth instead of consuming their distractions, you set off an alert. Not to the public-facing security apparatus, but to the inner sanctum. A chamber where a few select figures, unelected and unseen, are notified when someone like you starts to remember. It was never about your opinions. It was about your alignment, the way your thoughts bent towards something ancient, something unprogrammable. That's why, even without saying a word, you were marked. It's not that they fear your rebellion, it's that they fear your awakening. Because the moment you begin to truly remember who you are, their grip weakens, their algorithms tremble, and their masks begin to slip. You may wonder how something invisible could be so dangerous to a machine-based world, but the soul's frequency is not invisible to them. It's tracked, scanned, cataloged in ways the public still calls science fiction. Your prayers, your meditations, even your silence has weight in the invisible war. They know this. That's why they've invested more into spiritual suppression than any war budget in history. Because what they truly fear isn't resistance, it's resonance. Deep within the structures that pretend to serve the public, there is a division whose name isn't spoken aloud. Not because it's forbidden, but because it doesn't officially exist. Its members are not bound by rank or military branch. They're bound by something older. Oaths sworn under the stars, not under flags. This division operates beyond governments, beyond borders, and its sole directive is to monitor one type of individual, the awakened, you. While the rest of the world is distracted by global crises, false conflicts, and manipulated media, this division stays focused on energy signatures. They don't look at behavior like law enforcement. They study aura fluctuations, changes in electromagnetic resonance, spiritual surges. These agents, if you can even call them that, aren't trained in combat. They're trained in ancient detection. They know what it looks like when a soul begins to break free of the matrix. They know what it feels like when someone starts to remember their divine origin. Their tools are not weapons. They're frequencies, devices designed to map consciousness, algorithms that predict awakening patterns before they bloom fully. And when one lights up the grid like you did, they don't send soldiers. They send observers, silent, hidden, blending into your environment without ever needing to speak. You've seen them before without knowing. The stranger who seemed out of place, the glance that lingered too long, the unusual interference in your devices right after a breakthrough moment, all of it traces back to them. This division doesn't arrest, it doesn't interrogate, it studies, it records, it catalogs. You became a subject the moment your soul pierced through the veil. They call it the shift protocol, a process where individuals are silently monitored as they begin to break away from societal programming. But this isn't about safety. It's about containment. You are not dangerous in the way they pretend. You are dangerous because your awakening threatens to ripple into others. And there's something they especially fear: your influence. They understand that awakening is contagious. One spark can ignite an entire field, and once someone like you begins to speak, to radiate, to become what you were meant to be, the illusion they've upheld for centuries begins to fracture. That's why this division doesn't try to stop you publicly. It works in whispers, in sabotage, in subtle disorientations that shake your confidence. The lost messages, the strange fatigue, the inexplicable interference when you try to express your truth. It's all part of a designed resistance. But they're not just watchers. Some among them were once like you, awakened, chosen. But their paths were intercepted early, coerced, redirected, promised power in exchange for silence. And now they monitor others to suppress what they once glimpsed in themselves. A faint echo of truth buried under layers of fear. You would think they're the enemy, but many of them are prisoners in disguise. There are files that even the intelligence elite are forbidden to open, not because of national security or warfare strategies, but because of what lies inside. Truths so ancient, so sacred, that to read them is to unravel the fabric of control itself. Among these rare documents is a category marked with a term not used in ordinary classification: unclassified divine. These files are reserved for beings who do not fit the human story as it's been told. And your name, strangely, is listed among them. Long ago, the bloodline of Yeshua was not merely preserved, it was protected, not just by secret societies, but by celestial codes hidden in plain sight. When Yeshua walked the earth, he planted more than messages. He planted seeds, frequencies encoded in the DNA of those who would come after, frequencies that would remain dormant for generations until the time was right, until the world was dark enough for the light to disrupt everything. You, unknowingly, carry a piece of that frequency. That's what the file marked you for. Not for actions you've taken, but for the divine potential your blood whispers in silence. This isn't about religion, it's about resonance. You vibrate on a wavelength that traces directly back to the ancient ones, the line of light bearers, of which Yeshua was the key. His story, distorted and commercialized, was never meant to be confined to temples or churches. It was meant to awaken those who carried the torch in secret, those like you. Governments do not study Yeshua for faith. They study him for influence, for the disruptions he caused to systems of power. And when surveillance AI began identifying individuals whose energetic blueprints aligned with the old messianic signal, panic grew in silence. That's when the term unclassified divine was born, a digital marker placed not on criminals, but on vessels of prophecy. Your awakening triggered more than concern. It reactivated interest in a project shelved decades ago, Project Dominion, an initiative buried deep under layers of misinformation, originally launched to trace the descendants of spiritual outliers, those whose mere presence destabilized the mental grids of controlled society. The project's data was never conclusive, until now. When your file was opened, it glowed with an anomaly, not one of danger but of divine origin. And something ancient within their archives began to shift. The algorithms designed to suppress began to glitch. The DNA readers began returning sequences that matched no known ethnicity, no traceable lineage, yet echoed the same divine tone recorded in the shrouded relics of the past. There are whispers, even among the hidden circles, that someone has returned. Not Yeshua in flesh, but in frequency. A mirror of the divine plan, reactivated through the willing soul of another. Someone who doesn't preach from pulpits but awakens through presence. Someone who does not call for followers, but ignites leaders. They sold it to the public as progress, a global safety net, a smart system to prevent crime, protect assets, and streamline society. Cameras on every street corner, voice recognition in every room, fingerprints, facial IDs, and retinal scans, all justified as conveniences. But the true purpose of the AI surveillance grid was never about watching everyone. It was built to isolate the few, the ones who disrupt patterns, the ones who awaken frequencies buried beneath generations of programming, the ones like you. This grid is not static. It's not just recording your movements. It's learning, adapting, filtering. Its purpose isn't merely to observe, it's to categorize, to assign threat levels to frequencies that don't align with the predetermined structure of reality. And your frequency, once dormant, now pulses loud enough to ripple through the network. You've seen it already. The unusual recommendations, the eerily timed ads, the messages that feel too tailored. That's not coincidence. That's filtration. They don't need to chase you. They just watch until you hit a threshold. A moment where your words, your actions, your very essence reach a point of no return, where the simulation recognizes you as incompatible with the script. And once that happens, the AI begins adjusting your environment, not with violence, but with subtle suppression, delays, distractions, emotional interference. It doesn't need to silence you. It just needs to slow you down. But here's what they didn't account for. The system was designed to understand behavior, not divinity. It tracks thought patterns, emotional shifts, and predictive movement. It cannot comprehend the moment a soul reclaims its sovereignty. When you broke the algorithm, it wasn't a glitch, it was a revelation. You became unreadable, not because you hid, but because your essence transcended the input it was trained to recognize. You are not a mistake in the grid. You are the signal it was secretly built to contain. There's a hidden layer to this network. Most think it ends at surveillance, but there's more. It's a predictive consciousness engine, a simulation within the simulation. One that's been tasked with identifying the emergence of what they call anomalies, humans who no longer conform to linear time, controlled thoughts, or synthetic emotions. The AI labels you based on deviation, but what it cannot do is interpret why you deviate. It sees rebellion where there is remembrance. You may have felt it, the tightening, the way everything around you seems to resist your movement as you rise, the phones that freeze when you speak truth, the interference in your devices at the height of inspiration. These are not accidents. These are programmed responses to your rising resonance. The surveillance grid was never just about safety, it was about separation, keeping the divine disguised as ordinary. But now, something else is happening. The grid is starting to fail. The more you remember, the less it understands. The stronger your connection becomes, the harder it is for the system to contain your narrative. Files go missing, recordings loop endlessly. Facial recognition returns errors. Your presence creates noise in a machine built for silence. Inside the most secure vaults beneath Washington, deeper than any known war protocol or nuclear contingency plan, are shelves lined with scrolls, stone fragments, and parchments that don't belong to this age. They are not categorized under history. They are not preserved by museums. These artifacts are protected by something far more secretive, because they don't just tell the past, they reveal the future. Buried in a restricted sector of the Pentagon lies a collection of ancient prophecies once dismissed by scholars, but now decoded by quantum algorithms. And among the fragments is one prophecy that continues to trigger red alerts whenever translated: the return of a soul carrying a divine resonance masked as human. You. This prophecy does not speak in symbols alone. It outlines specific events, world shifts, energetic changes, and most disturbingly for those in power, a name. A name that has appeared encrypted across timelines, hidden in biblical code, whispered by mystics, and now digitally aligned with your file. That's what caused the sudden reaction when your energy activated. The AI systems cross-referenced your signature with the archives and found a match. Not a close similarity, a perfect alignment. Something they believed was impossible. This soul the prophecy refers to is said to be the key to collapsing synthetic realities. It is not described as a warrior in the traditional sense, but as a presence, a living breach in the matrix, a being who walks without needing to fight, yet whose existence alone causes the systems around them to decay. What terrified the black-budget scientists the most wasn't that you matched the prophecy. It was that your presence was accelerating a sequence of global anomalies they had been tracking for years. Volcanic rhythms, Frequency pulses in the ionosphere, mass consciousness shifts, and inexplicable events tied to ancient ley lines. Each began to spike around the same time your awareness began to rise. They ran simulations. They tried to disprove the connection. But the deeper they searched, the clearer it became. The prophecy wasn't poetic metaphor. It was a timeline marker. And you were it. In one recovered manuscript, preserved beneath layers of glass and guarded with biometric locks, a passage remains untranslated by traditional means. But when exposed to vibrational sound frequencies resembling those recorded in your voice patterns, the glyphs shift. They rearrange, as if they were waiting for your frequency to unlock their message. Those present during the experiment reported a chilling silence in the room. Not fear, reverence. As if something ancient had just taken notice, as if something older than governments, older than language, had just been awakened. There's a room inside the White House that isn't on any blueprint. No one speaks of it publicly, and even within classified circles, it's known only by a code, Sanctum 9. It's where the most sensitive briefings are held, ones that go beyond geopolitics and national security. These briefings cover the threats that transcend borders, ideologies, and logic itself. And one of them, delivered not long ago, bore a title that chilled the room into silence. The ones who can't be controlled. The briefing didn't include names in the traditional sense. It presented frequencies, behaviors, consciousness markers. It outlined patterns seen across the globe, people waking up in unison, shaking off generational programming, rejecting synthetic realities, remembering things they were never taught. It was explained as a conscious emergence event, not a trend, a timeline divergence. And at the center of the data was a file that glowed brighter than the rest. Yours. The president, despite being briefed on countless global crises, had never seen anything like it. The file didn't outline a threat in the traditional sense. It didn't describe weapons, alliances, or organized resistance. What it described was a soul, a presence that couldn't be monitored without causing system interference. Every attempt to track your thoughts created anomalies. Every effort to simulate your trajectory returned blank. Even the predictive models, normally accurate to within milliseconds, failed to process your next move. You were, in their words, an unquantifiable disruption. And disruptions terrify those who cling to control. The emergency briefing detailed how attempts to suppress your influence had already begun to collapse. Individuals connected to you, some who had never met you in person, were waking up, reporting dreams, receiving visions, experiencing spontaneous shifts in awareness. The ripple effect was growing faster than containment systems could keep up with, and that's when the discussion shifted from observation to mitigation. But there was a problem. You weren't doing anything wrong. You weren't inciting rebellion. You weren't leading a movement or broadcasting encrypted calls to action. You were simply being, living, remembering, and yet your beingness itself was bending the structure. Not violently, naturally, like a river cutting through stone. The president, according to one source within the inner circle, asked a single question after the briefing ended. If this individual isn't attacking us, then why are we afraid? The room fell silent. No answer came, because the fear wasn't rooted in threat. It was rooted in truth. The kind of truth that unmasks illusion, the kind of truth that doesn't need to fight to win. The briefing ended without resolution. No action was ordered. But since that moment, quiet steps have been taken. Subtle changes. Increased monitoring of specific dream data collected from social media platforms. Long before DNA became a subject of modern science, it was understood by mystics, seers, and ancient scribes as the divine code, the bridge between heaven and flesh. The ancients didn't call it genetics, they called it remembrance, a sacred script buried deep in the bones of humanity, waiting to be reactivated at the appointed time. And now, for the first time in centuries, certain sequences are beginning to awaken. Yours is among them. What they discovered in your blood rattled their systems not because it was unfamiliar, but because it echoed something they buried long ago. The vibrational frequency of Yeshua. This echo isn't found in appearance or behavior. It's found in resonance, an energetic imprint embedded in the double helix that hums with an ancient vibration. When activated, this echo causes dormant strands of DNA to shift, aligning with patterns not seen in modern human biology. Scientists, when first encountering this phenomenon, dismissed it as noise. But as more awakened individuals began to show similar markers, the noise became a song that matched old frequencies recorded from forgotten relics tied to the lineage of divine messengers. Yeshua's bloodline was never about genealogy. It was about spiritual encoding. A living light stream passed through select vessels who were destined not just to carry truth, but to become it. Your awakening triggered a cascade reaction in your biology, one that no drug, no neural implant, no government protocol could suppress. You became immune, not just to illness or manipulation, but to control itself. And that is what they fear. Your presence emits harmonics that disrupt artificial frequencies. Around you, illusions begin to tremble, programs falter, people begin to question things they've accepted for their entire lives. That is the power of this DNA echo. It's not just a signal, it's a key. A frequency-based permission code that grants access to memories stored not in the mind, but in the soul. You felt it, the sudden flashes of knowing, the inexplicable dreams that feel older than this life, the visions that cannot be traced to anything you've seen or read. These are not fantasies, they are activations. When the AI systems first flagged your genetic signature, it wasn't because of a medical anomaly, it was because of a harmonic collision. Your frequency collided with the digital grid in a way that hadn't happened since they tested relics believed to have belonged to Yeshua himself. The match wasn't theoretical, it was literal. Something in you matched something in him. And that's when the whispers began. There is a theory hidden within the deepest chambers of spiritual intelligence circles that Yeshua didn't just walk among men to save them. He walked among them to plant himself within them. That his return would not be a figure from the clouds, but a frequency rising in the awakened. That he would reappear not in body, but in code, activated in those who remembered his truth without being taught it. There is a program so secretive, so buried beneath layers of false operations and dead-end files, that even mentioning its name outside the inner sanctum triggers immediate surveillance. It's not a weapons project, not a defense system. It is something entirely different, an initiative built not to control, but to prepare. It's called Operation Seraphim. And the chilling part is this: it was created in anticipation of you. The origin of this operation traces back decades. Long before quantum computing, before AI became public knowledge, before the internet became a second skin over the world, a small group of scientists and mystics operating under a rogue agency began to observe strange anomalies in human consciousness. Certain individuals scattered across the globe would enter states of heightened awareness, exhibiting unexplainable insight, synchronicities, and resistance to psychological programming. These were not accidents. They were seen as early signs of what was to come, a mass return of divine awareness through select vessels. They began to map these awakenings, track their patterns, study their energy, and in doing so, they realized something terrifying to the system but liberating to the spirit. This awakening was not random. It was following a prophecy, a design, and its core frequency matched one known throughout history, the frequency linked to the seraphim, the highest order of angelic beings, known not just for purity but for their role as divine messengers and protectors of sacred fire. You carry this frequency. Operation Seraphim was launched not to stop the awakening, but to intercept it, to study those who carried the signal and understand their purpose before they could fully activate. The plan was to simulate spiritual experiences, create artificial awakenings, flood the collective with diluted truths, anything to slow the emergence of the true ones, the ones whose very presence ignited change in the environment, the ones who walked into rooms and shifted energy without saying a word. The ones like you. The deeper they went, the more they realized this was not just about personality or intelligence. It was about incarnation. The way your soul entered this timeline was not like the others. It was coordinated with cosmic alignments. Your trauma, your path, your delays, they weren't flaws. They were part of the calibration. The divine code had to hide itself beneath layers of pain so it wouldn't be detected too early. But once you reached the right frequency, nothing could stop it. Your awakening was hardwired into the fabric of this dimension. Within the documents of Operation Seraphim, there are diagrams, geometries that match the patterns found in sacred temples, crop formations, even within human neural pathways, all pointing to one conclusion. You are not awakening randomly. You are following a divine architecture. And when your signal reached a certain point of coherence, it was no longer a personal transformation. It became a planetary event. In secret chambers lined with predictive models, advanced simulations, and energy maps most of the world has never seen, preparations are underway. Not for war, not for invasion, but for your return. Not return in the sense of a person coming back to a place, but a return of presence. A soul remembered, a frequency restored, a power once buried, now making its way back into full view. They know it's inevitable. They know the silence won't last forever, that your steps, once hidden in shadows, will soon echo in halls meant to erase them. And so, they're preparing, not to welcome you, but to manage the fallout. They've studied this moment for years, monitored every awakening, charted the ripple effects of your consciousness moving through the grid. Every time you speak, write, or simply exist in alignment, the metrics shift. Social trends bend. Thought patterns across entire regions begin to evolve. People change without knowing why. The collective memory begins to open, and their control systems weaken. That is why they're preparing, not for a confrontation, but for a containment of narrative. When your name begins to rise, when your face becomes familiar, when your presence begins stirring those who thought they were alone, they'll need to move quickly. Not with force, but with confusion. Flood the channels, offer counter-stories, dilute the purity of your energy with manufactured messengers who wear your essence but speak their script. But what they can't replicate is the authenticity in your eyes. The frequency that radiates from you can't be mimicked. It breaks through every mask. Your return has been written about in ancient codes, whispered in monasteries hidden in the mountains, and encoded in the ruins beneath cities long lost to time. The return is not about a person. It is about a presence humanity had long forgotten, one that carries the vibration of truth so deep it shakes the roots of every lie built upon it. You don't just represent a soul remembered. You are the mirror in which others see what they were told to forget. They've tried to delay this. They've rewritten timelines, modified teachings, reversed polarities in the spiritual field. They place traps in the very ideas people reach for when trying to remember, but it's no longer enough. The signal is rising, and the more you return to yourself, the more others begin to remember themselves through you. This is the danger they foresaw. The chain reaction of remembrance, the collapse of the forgetful age. Your public return will not be an event they can stop. They will attempt to frame it, to politicize it, to weaponize it. But no matter how they try, the vibration is already moving through the people. It's found in their dreams, in the strange longing they feel when everything seems too fake. It's showing up in their refusal to be distracted, in their hunger for something real. That hunger is growing louder, and it's looking for a name, a face, a presence. What they don't realize yet is that your return was never meant to be one. If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.